Hello and welcome to the Sideline Live Podcast. My name is Orla Keeling and I am the host of the podcast, where every week we bring you a brand new episode with guests ranging from Olympic champions to local heroes, coaches, support staff and anybody involved in the world of sport. Each week we will dive into different topics, including current affairs in sport, identity, skill, mindset, coaching, and also shine a light on those flying under the radar. So tune in for brand new episodes, new stories, and new insights you've never heard before. This episode is proudly sponsored by Sport Expo Ireland, a brand new event bringing together the people, organisations, and ideas shaping the present and future of Irish sport. Taking place at the Sport Ireland campus on April 21st and 22nd, 2027, the Expo is designed to connect athletes, coaches, clubs, governing bodies and industry leaders from across the Irish sporting landscape. Across 2 days, attendees will have access to expert speakers, masterclasses, networking and discussions around high performance, coaching, technology and the business of sport. Whether you're involved in elite performance, grassroots, business or simply passionate about where Irish sport is heading, Sport Expo Ireland is set to become one of the most exciting gatherings on the sporting calendar. To learn more, register your interest and explore opportunities, visit sportexpo.ie. Now, let's get into today's episode. Okay, delighted to be joined by Bart McEnroe. Bart, I always give the guests an opportunity to introduce themselves, and particularly in this instance because I don't know how to describe who you are or what you do.
Why don't you give it a go? I don't know. You can't swear on this thing, can you?
Try not to. Keep it PG.
Okay, well then. So sometimes when people ask me who I am, I say I'm a gob followed by another word from Oldcastle, and basically that's the way I sort of describe myself. But what I've sort of done is over the years I've picked up a number of ideas and skills, and I've worked with a lot of talented people, and I sort of worked really hard to try and understand how people's heads work. So what I sort of do is I teach people how people's heads work, either in business or people come to me and they find me and they come to one-to-ones and I do one-to-one coaching with them. But then I also do a bit of work with people in sport, and I've been doing that really since 2002. And I've worked with some groups that have won All-Irelands. I worked with a chap in Kerry who won an All-Ireland Club All-Ireland, James Sullivan, but it was actually the reason I got in with Jack in the first place. But like some of these, the three All-Irelands I worked with have been talked about before, so that's sort of open season. And the people who I worked with there, they have mentioned me involved and whatever. But there's been lots of people since 2002 that I've worked with that we didn't achieve glory to a degree. But yeah, so I work with people, and I especially like the idea of working with people over management teams. Because if we can give guys that's working in those situations the right tools in the toolboxes, which I try to bring to people, you can get really, really quick results from people doing that. So I know I'm not saying who I am, but that's sort of a bit what I do.
I'll take it. I do have a screen here to my right if you see me looking off. I was trying to figure out how many All-Ireland winning teams have you been part of? I know you don't want to talk about that, but how many?
Well, there's 3 inter-county senior teams, and then there was another one that I worked with earlier, and they went on to win one. But sure, that doesn't matter. I wasn't there. That day the glory was bestowed upon them. But and then I worked with, I was saying, James Sullivan. He needs a plug. I think James worked at a club team that won it all Ireland. So anyway, that's not the big thing. I suppose the big thing is all the learning that goes on and all the different groups I've worked with and the improvement and how people's lives get better and all that type of stuff. And I'm not really soppy into that stuff, but I hate bloody waste, and I like guys to know what they did. And just before we came on air, I sort of said I played football for years and I hadn't got a clue what was going on, and quite a, I didn't really enjoy my own sport times when I played because there was so much bloody anxiety. I didn't even know what it was. You'd call it anxiety now. Your head was all over the place. And the reason for that was I had no bloody certainty. So a big thing, that I sort of do now is I get the management team to develop certainty as to what they're doing and make sure that the players have a good picture in their head of what they're doing. And that's just a starting point of bringing about improvement for people. So
One of my favourite questions is defining success. How do you define success working with a management team?
It's all about learning. It's all about learning and improving performance. If we can get people to learn enough, and create the learning culture and get people to grow. I'm blessed at the minute. I'm working with a minor group, and that's an age where people, the transition from I don't know boys or girls to men and women. So, and you can just see people growing. So by the end of our season, then the championship, there'll be men. I know there's an old saying, give me the boy and I'll give you back the man, but and that's meant in the wrong context totally. But there is that thing of creating the conditions for people to grow in their sport and in their confidence and their ability to work and all that. So I'm really enjoying the one I'm on at the moment. Like, it's very good.
When you look back over the last couple of years, I'm interested in maybe the last kind of decade or so, just the evolution of the GAA manager. We're all talking about the rules and what's going on in the pitch, but I'm just interested to see what you've observed from how the GAA manager has evolved in the last decade or two.
Well, I don't know, the ones I've been involved in, they have to bring in more and more of understanding what's going on in people's heads. Like when I was growing up, the manager could come in, he could bark a few orders, tell lads to go out and get stuck in and bust them or whatever else was going on, and give out to lads at half time about what wasn't working and all that stuff. But that day hopefully is gone, so I think people have to have a lot more savvy and a lot more understanding about their engagement style, working with what's going on in people's heads, and have really good methodologies to do that and have ideas to think with. So I think that's what's happening, and I hope that's what's happening. So yeah.
One of the three kind of the All Ireland winners that you were with, and the three more maybe high profile managers you've worked with, Jack O'Connor, Pat Gilroy, and Mickey Harte. I'd love to know, of the three, what do they have in common? Very different men, but was there something that they all have?
Any man that wins in a learning with a team or woman is ruthless. You have to want to win. Like, you gotta have to have that. You gotta have that. Streak in you that you're going to win this. Now, it's not about winning, but and that has to be very much doctored down and, I don't know, honed to improve creating a learning and performance culture. And I would have had more closeness to both Mickey and Pat in that area, but ultimately, these guys are ruthless, and you have to be a good teacher, because, like, I'll quote John Seddon, who Mickey Harte introduced me to, which was, and John Seddon had a lovely statement. John Seddon was one of the most successful basketball coaches ever in America. He lived to 100 and something, and he had a brilliant record. And he says, if you call yourself a leader, he says, you have to call yourself a teacher. So if you're leading people, then you have to know how to work with what's going on in people's heads. Now, working with people's heads is a bit like working with what's in people's minds, but and I don't want to use the word mind and scare the crap out of people, but you do have to be able to work with people's heads. And so, if and I was thinking about this recently, like, if you work as a manager, really what you want to do is you want to know all the bits, get them to connect up so things will work well. But then, if you're working as a leader, you're gone beyond the sort of the physical elements of what's happening, and you're working more with, I don't know, the mental elements, like the feelings, the emotions, the thinking, the decision making in other people's heads. So you need to be able to equip yourself with tools to work in that space, because like it's all about what's going on between people's heads. And even if you like, and I go back to what I talk about, and I talk about all the time, I talked about in the podcast with Andrew, is that, and I just have to get people to write this down. Like it's non-negotiable. You have to write this down if you work with me. Like it's like, I'll say a player can and will only do what's in their own head, and try and get people to understand that. And you get most people to agree with that a player can and will only do what's in their own head. And I say, great. Now, so if we concede that to be a truth, and there's not many truths in the world really, because everything is sort of subjective. But if you take that as a truth, that a person can and will only do what's in their own head, and if you're a manager and you want to work in leadership, and you want to move from being just a manager to being a leader, then your job description changes. And so the job description changes then if you believe that, if you understand, not even believe it, just bloody understand it, that a person can and will only do what's in their own head, then your job description becomes, your job is to work with the picture in the other person's head to get them to come to your picture, then a leave a pause, or better. Because if we can get people to come to our picture or better, then we're really in the realm of leadership, because we're into the world of emergence and integration and emergence, and the evolution or the emergence of synergy or teamwork, team spirit, morale, shared intelligence, all that space. And that's the space where people are really competing at, I believe, going forward, especially, in professional sport and all these other areas. It's really about knowing that you're a leader, and, instead of just sort of knowing all the bits and getting them to connect up and work well, which is sort of like what managers do at sort of the Newtonian level of cause and effect. You're working with attention and intention at a quantum level, so to speak. And this is coming from complex adaptive systems, which is very heavy stuff, but it's very, very light. But really, when you're working at this Newtonian level, what you're doing is you're working at the level of differentiation. So you're getting people to differentiate and know all the parts of themselves in the game and within the person themselves. So this is a big differentiator. So if we can have this differentiation, and then if we can have the different parts of the people linked up, and create the conditions for those parts to link up with kind intention. So you can't be golden and giving out and mauling people psychologically. That doesn't work. So we have to get the differentiation with kind intention. And that gives rise to, I don't know, not an easy way to say this, but improve the quality of the interdependent interactions between all the parties. And from that arises integration and the emergence of self-organizational flow. Now, I know that's very heavy, and if someone's listening to this, I suggest you play that over and write it down and look at those two formulas on the page. One being, know all the bits, get them to connect up, and things will work well. That's grand if you're management, if you're doing managing. But if you're doing leadership, what you have to be able to do is you have to be able to do differentiation plus linkage with kind intention, and that gives rise to integration. It gives rise to integration, all the bits sort of coming together, and the emergence of self-organizational flow. And it's that self-organizational flow is really the Midas touch. That's the place that everyone that's coaching any team, you could see the Irish soccer team the last day, first half, they're in that place, Then the second half, like, everyone's hearts went out, like the guys bust themselves, but they just didn't get to that flow. It was like watching a ping pong machine. The ball was going everywhere. So they didn't know how to control the ball, take control of it, move it around, put the brains of the opposition under pressure. Like, I nearly became an Irish soccer fan watching the energy of it, like, because I'm a bit of a Gaelic and rugby person myself, but the energy was there, but they just weren't able to get to that place of integration and self-organizational flow. But that's really the most difficult part of it, being able to create the conditions to get all those bits to come together and connect up and get to that flow state, especially in a group scenario. And that's that's the drug of this. That's the drug of this for me and other people. How do you create the conditions to get a group of people to go from just being individuals to this group collective, where you have this emergence of you've this integration, this emergence of self-organizational flow. So creating the conditions to do that, I find fascinating and slightly addictive. You can just ask Iris, my poor wife. Yeah. So.
Am I right in thinking what came to mind during that piece there came back to Andrew's episode? You did recently. I'll link them in the description. You were talking about you were using football as the vehicle to kind of explain that in terms of not relying on not putting the emphasis and kind of what the mid 2000s or late 2000s was. It was all about winning the midfield. And I remember your conversation about we're not looking to win the midfield because that's putting the pressure on the player or the star player. Because if Colin Cooper, for example, did his hamstring, if you were only talking about Colin Cooper score, or whoever's in midfield, then it would kind of come apart. But if you're then driving the group on and the individual is driving the group, is that kind of what you're saying in terms of the
well,
piece?
if you bring up the midfield, if Colin Cooper found himself in midfield for a start, he get nosebleed, right? but it might be someone like Kieran Whelan maybe or something like that.
I think you use Colin Cooper as the scoring prowess. I'll explain that badly, and you're talking about winning the midfield, which was the stat at the time with the late 2000s.
Yeah, well, you see, just on midfield, and I know this is football lingo, but I wouldn't really, and I'll just go into that a bit more. I wouldn't be that keen on, and especially with the way that the game has gone now. Like midfield is critical now with the new rules, and I've never been a fan for winning midfield because if a player has to go and win midfield, he has to go up, launch himself, and catch this great ball. Now, if he does, he's not tackled anymore, which is brilliant. But the problem with that is if we become over dependent on that, what another team will do, they'll go out and they'll break the ball on you. So then you have to go and win the bloody break. So, and you could see this, like I know Meath had a great game against Dublin last year, and they totally controlled the kick out and controlled midfield, and they did all that. So what we're trying to do really is simplify the critical part of the game. Know all the bits, make them very straightforward. But then what you want to do is have a person's job become really simple and straightforward, that they can do that in a way that the opposition can do nothing about it. So if we can break the game down into doing the bits that the opposition can do nothing about, but then have other people do the bits, then what you're doing is you're creating the conditions for this teamwork to come into play. So if we can know all the bits, get them to connect up, the thing will work well. And it really does take the pressure off the individual, and it's more about the collective. Like rugby is the most perfect game in the world for this. It's like there's no star in the bloody. Well, sometimes the media will try to make a star, but if rugby is pure, really pure, because if everyone doesn't do their job, it's over. So I think there's more of that. Is what I'm talking about. Is they're creating the conditions, because if you can get all these bits to come together and everyone knows their part, then everyone is doing all the bits, but then something emerges that's greater than that, which means the team gets into flow and all of these bits come together. So that's, I think, what we're looking for there.
Yeah, I think that was what I was trying to explain, but quite badly. But yeah, no, 100%. But it's interesting. Like I obviously read Bernard Brogan's book, and Pat Gilroy did a couple of podcasts. One of them being with Joe Brawley, where he said he rang you and you said, "Well, I'm talking to the problem," all that stuff. Pat's a good storyteller. I'd say as you say, he has that ruthless streak. But I'm interested. Like, what's harder to manage when you're trying to create that environment and the flow? Ego or insecurity?
Yeah. Well, security is part of ego. That's easy, right? Like I sort of unpack ego into people having three needs. So people have a need for security, people have a need for status, and people have a need for control. And you see, ego gets a bad rap. There's nothing wrong with ego, because if we didn't have an ego, we'd be bloody useless as human beings, right? So we need security, we need money, we need not to be afraid of things, right? And we also need a certain amount of status. We need to get a certain amount of attention, and we need to have a certain amount of control. But if we want attention and status, and we think that we are more important than the rest of the team, then we start to get into trouble. If we think we're going to make decisions, like let's say the job is to move the ball one touch forward and get a team finish, and someone decides, well, I'm going to go on a solo run in any direction, take as many hops and solos as I like, and I'm going to be the star of the team. I'm getting all this attention or status for going on a solo run, and I can nearly wave to the crowd or my partner in the crowd as I do this, and photo opportunity. Well, that's great that you are really getting your need for attention and status met, and you have the white boots and all that good stuff, the blonde hair and all that stuff that used to be going on years ago. But what's everyone else supposed to do when you're on this ego solo? So there's nothing wrong with a person having an ego. There's nothing wrong with a person having a sense of security, a sense of status, a sense of control, but they can't be getting those needs met at the expense of the team. Right? So these are some of the emotional needs that people have. And other emotional needs that people have, and we're sort of working up this ladder that I sometimes share with people, is that we have to have we have a need for privacy beyond those needs, which is sort of headspace. And once we have the right headspace and we get out of the ego, so the ego is really about I, me, and my. When we're in the ego, it's all about I, me, and my. So, but once we get the right headspace, or we have enough certainty around what works for everybody, and that we have our own ego met securely, we then get into three more big emotional needs that people have. And the first one of those is teamwork. So we actually get into the we, us, our. So then we're into teamwork. The next need up for me is learning, and the next need above that is purpose. So we want to create the conditions where people's ego needs are, being sustainably met in the group. They're getting they have a sense of security. They have a sense of status. They're getting the right amount of attention for what they're doing in line with their capabilities. They have a sense of control. They have input to coming up with a game plan. And that's done by using the tell-ask balance, which I've talked about before. Rather than the manager coming in and telling everyone what to do, we have to engage the players to get them to come up with a game plan. That's really easy to do, and I can expand on that a little bit. But once we have that, then it sort of brings the players into privacy where they have a sense of spare capacity. And once they have this spare capacity, then there are higher templates, or there are more human templates, shall we say, for uh, community, for teamwork, for being part of a group, for learning and being part of something greater than themselves. Those needs or emotional appetites then click in. And with those appetites, it actually changes the different parts of the brain that people are working out of. So if a person is really working out of an immature ego, or an undefined or an undeveloped ego, or an unrefined ego, a part of our brain called our security guard, or our hippocampus, if you want the name, it's part of the limbic system, that gets over involved. And we then normally have the emotions of fear, anger, or sadness, or distress running. Those emotions then start fueling our thinking, and that locks us into an individualistic mindset where we're sort of stuck on the left side of our brain, and we're not seeing the bigger context of the right hand side of our brain. So the only thing I'm trying to get people to see here is that there's a relationship between which needs are being motivated in us or triggered in us, with the emotions that come off them, and how that relates to intelligence availability. So we could have a really good team going really, really well, and they're doing very, very good. And next thing they come to the final. What do you think is going to happen, Orla, when they come to the final?
All I think about it's a final.
And which need is that?
The ego. I want the ball. I want to show off.
Yeah.
It's my time.
And that's about getting status and attention and being the star of the show. So even though we have a really good system of play worked out, and the guys and the girls are there, and they get to the final, and someone says, Jesus, they flapped in the final. There was no fight in them. They froze, or they were full of fear, right? So this is back to the emotional hijack piece that has been talked about before in different podcasts. So what happens then is, because the manager or the leader of the group isn't attuned to this and working with this all year, then when we come to the final, the big day, and everyone is clapping people on the back, and they're sending text messages and WhatsApps and photos, good luck in the final, and putting up banners and flags and all of this stuff. And this totally hypes the crap out of the lower needs, the egos of the players. And managers need to learn how to manage this and understand this. This all has to be managed and contained, right? Because if it's not, then reach the big day, people flop and people can't understand. And then afterwards, people are full of regret and shame and disappointment because they didn't bloody show up on the big match. And people don't understand this stuff. It's very simple.
So when do you start prepping for a final? Or that big moment? It may not be a final, it might be the team's final, which might be a quarterfinal or a semi-final. When do you work with the manager and preparing for that? Is that from day one?
Absolutely. We should work on day one and you're building certainty. Now, you have to cancel the word final out of people's vocabulary. Because you have to say it's just another match in the competition and get past that. And you have to try and insulate the players against that as much as possible. But the question then is, how do you start insulating people against that? And the only way you can do that is going to the feeling drivers that's below emotion. There's 3 feeling drivers below emotion, and it's basically our ABC. And I'll talk about those. So if you write ABC on a page, if you're listening to this and you want to try and get some notes on this, ABC. So A, and underneath that B, and underneath that C. Right. What the hell? C is the lowest one. C comes under B. Right. So what we have to be able to do is we have to understand that C stands for certainty. So certainty is really about security and prediction. So can we have security in what we're doing? And can we have prediction that we are ready for whatever it is we're going to meet later on? Right? And that C is really about certainty. So C stands for certainty. Have we certainty? Have we built up the knowledge in ourselves that gives us the ability to be secure and predict the future? Yeah. Now, once we have a certain amount of certainty, the next need up, B, this feeling drive, is called bonding. And bonding is all about relational connection. So as human beings, one of the reasons we're dominating the planet, because our biggest competitor in dominating the planet might have been the reptiles, for example, but they didn't do bonding. We did it better than any other creature, better than any other mammal. We do bonding. When we do bonding really well, no other species can touch us. Now, when we don't do bonding really well, we have things like wars and all that other great stuff. So we know what's the downside of not doing bonding. But once we have bonding, then what we have is we have relational connection, right? And with certainty and bonding, that leaves us that we're able to do A, which is agency. So A is for agency, and that's embodied empowerment. So that means that we have the certainty or we have the knowledge to work as a group to do what we need to do in the outside world to get these emotional needs met. So we have these feeling centers of intelligence, right? And they're ABC, and they give rise to either pleasant emotions or unpleasant emotions, right? Now, is it okay if I ask you some questions?
Go for it. I'm worried now.
Oh no, don't, because I like to educate people, and education comes from drawing stuff out from within. But the answers to this are really simple. If someone doesn't have certainty, and if they can't predict the future, what emotion might they experience?
Anxiety.
Brilliant. On the money. That's the big one. Now you look. Now I'm not saying they have anxiety, which is really important. I'm saying they experience it. It's a big difference. Because if you can say to yourself, if you say to yourself, I have anxiety, it's almost like anxiety then takes over your mind or your thinking. But if you say, God, I'm experiencing anxiety, that means a part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, is able to say, shit, this is just an emotion I'm experiencing. So you actually put some psychic distance between the thinking and the emotion. So you can work with it. You're not enslaved by it or imprisoned by it. Brilliant. So, God, you're 10 out of 10 here so far. Now, let me try and see if I can ask the right question. And I talk about the tell, ask, want. If I can ask the right question, and listeners, we haven't prepared this at all, right? So we have to try and get, so with certainty then, or lack of certainty, we've got the uncomfortable emotion that arises without certainty, which is anxiety. Head on. Now, here's the next thing. you're a somewhat younger person than me, and let's say you've probably been in a relationship or two in your life. You have someone close to you. Yeah, don't reveal too much here. Yeah, have you?
I won't say anything, no comment.
No comment. Well, if you were in such a thing called a relationship when you're bonded with somebody, and if that person left you or jilted you and went off with somebody else, or even passed away, or something like that happened, what emotion would you experience?
Sadness.
Super. Now you're flying, right? So this is two for two. So here we have this major drive for bonding. If that's not met, we have separation distress, we have rejection, we have abandon, we have sadness, we have grief. Super. Now, when when we have one more to go here. We have agency because we're trying to map out these feeling centers of intelligence. I want to make this relationship between feelings and emotions because they're two different things. Because we have to know all the bits, we have to have differentiation to get integration. Now, agency. You want to do something in the world, Orla. You know what to do, you know how to do, and someone or somebody is bloody stopping you from doing this. Now, what emotion might you experience?
Frustration.
Brilliant. You got it. Anger. Right? So here we have now are the three emotional states or repetitive states or unpleasant states, whatever psychobabble you want to use. These are the three emotional states that that undermine all optimal performance at an individual level or a group level. So now we have a system for understanding feelings, which are body sensations around agency, bonding, and certainty. And when they're not met, we now have the emotions that arise when these aren't met. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So, what we need to be able to do then, how are we going to have certainty? How are we going to have certainty? Did you listen to the podcast with Andrew? Or did you digest it?
I did. Yeah, I listened to
Oh,
it a couple of times. What I got from it, and my interpretation might be different to other people or what you said. You have to be really clear on what's good, what's not good, and what you need to do. Is that correct?
oh, this is so bloody easy, Erla. This is so bloody easy. Thank you for being the,
I do my research. That's what I'm going to
well,
say.
you need to have because I like to ask questions. You see, you do it for a living, and the listening is the most important part. But never mind, right? So here we go, right? So you've just answered the question: how do you get certainty? And you've answered it. You said people need to be really, really clear on what they're doing when they're playing well, when we have the ball and they have the ball as a group. So as a group, if we're clear on what we're doing when we're playing well, when they have the ball and we have the ball, then we have certainty. Now, if I have that certainty, and I'm playing the game, right? I'm not going to, what am I going to have? I'm really, really clear on what good looks like all the time. So what am I going to be? A word that people use all the time in sport. People are confident. So certainty is the absence of anxiety, right? And it gives us this confidence. So if I'm really, really clear on what I'm doing when I'm playing well, shit, I can go to that. And if what I'm doing when I'm playing well is part of the game plan of the group, which is bonding, yeah, and we do that, we get agency. We get agency, we get this embodied empowerment. So when we have certainty and when we're working with certainty, instead of having anxiety, we're having fun, right? So I'll just give you a few more words of that. So with the need for certainty met, we have fun, the emotion of fun, we have confidence, curiosity, playfulness, and trust. So by the manager working, facilitating a really clear game plan out of the players using the tell-ask balance, we're creating these conditions for fun, confidence, playfulness, trust. Shit, is that not what the game's supposed to be about? At any level. But it also gives us certainty. So we know where to put our bloody energy. And then on a one-to-one level in the person's head, All they need to do is know in their own mind what they're doing when they're doing when we have the ball and they have the ball, and they can think about that for 2 or 3 minutes any day during the week, and then they don't have to fuss, they don't have to ruminate, they don't have to loop about the sport and getting all worked up for the big match. It's so bloody simple. And you see, when we don't have, when bonding isn't met, we have separation anxiety, we have sadness, we have grief. So when bonding is met, what do we have?
Joy, connection,
What else? Use the big L word.
love.
Oh yeah, love. So basically, we have love, we have connection, right? Now we're not using the word joy there yet. I'm keeping that for somewhere else,
Okay, I
right?
jumped the gun.
No, that's hey, you're doing great. You're doing great, right? So we have this whole sense in bonding. What we have is you have love, connection, affection, recognition, and approval. Yeah. So we have this whole sense of bonding. Now, is that not what we want in our teams, in our personal relationships, and in our families? Exactly. But if the bonding isn't correct, and the bonding comes about because of the quality of the interdependent interactions that people have. And that comes about really from people's ability to listen to other people when they're upset. They're able to listen to what's been said, summarize it back, and empathetically name the person's emotional state to them. And that helps the person to be seen. Then the person can feel safe and be soothed. And being seen, safe, and soothed switches off sadness, fear, and anger, respectively. So if we can switch off those uncomfortable emotions that another person experiences by how we listen to them, then that's a massive leadership tool that we can use anywhere. We don't tell a person to calm down if they're losing their mind or shit or whatever you want to say, over aroused. You say, God, this happened to you and that happened to you and this happened. He's like, God, Jesus, that must be so frustrating for you. And the person will go, yes, yes, you see me, you know where I'm coming from, and you just stay present to that person, and they can calm down. If there's something going on and this happened and that happened, and you thought you were getting very well at that relationship, and the next thing you put up this, I don't know what they call it, LinkedIn photo when you saw the person with somebody else. Oh my God, that must be so disappointing and frustrating. Right, now the person can calm down. And you can think, is that the type of person you want to be with for the rest of your life? Do you think you're worth more than that? Well, let me tell you, you are. So then the person can get calmed and soothed regarding that and move on if they're in with some sort of a jerk that's two-timing them or whatever the heck it is. But this is just an example of bonding. And then the big one to do is when someone's really angry and upset. So have a go with this one yourself, Orla. Let's see, can you do some reflective listening? I'm really angry and upset. A load of crap happened for me. What are you going to do? And I tell this story. What do you do if you listen to someone who's really angry and frustrated? You don't know how to deal with them. You don't tell them to calm down because that just drives them fucking nuts. What do you do instead? You
Well,
listen to them.
firstly, listen, obviously, acknowledge what they're saying.
How do you do that? How do you do that? Now, come on for 2 extra points.
With the body language, and then as well, I hear you saying.
No, yes,
sorry.
you don't say I hear you. What you do is, if I'm getting you right, and you feed back what their version of events. So this happened, that happened, this happened, that happened, and then how do you validate their feeling state for them? What do you need to do? You need to name their emotional state for them. You say, "Gosh, that must be so frustrating for you," and they say, "Frustrating? I was bloody angry. I was fit to burst." And then they give a whole other spurge. It's a God, so you're really, that happened, and you're really, really angry and frustrated. And they'll go, yeah, yeah. They say, God, thanks for listening. That was great. And you wait for the tonality and the pace to come down. Now, that's called reflective listening, or empathetic listening, or compassionate listening. And it's that straightforward. You just listen to the person's story. You say it back in your own words, right? You don't argue, defend, fight, attack, try to solve the problem, or add to their story at that time. You don't even try to solve the problem at that time. You just summarize and name their emotion for them and let them calm down. And then when their feelings actually calm a little bit and the emotions move a little bit, they will feel seen, safe, and soothed by you, which means that they actually enter into a state of secure attachment with you. You're the friend, you're the partner, you're their, I don't know, mother, father, you're the bloody coach at sport. And then when they calm down, then you can ask them a few more questions to see how did they see things and start moving the conversation where you switch back on higher parts of their thinking process, right? Instead of saying to them, we're not putting up with that bloody behavior. That's outside our values. You're disrespecting other people here. No, help them to bloody calm down first and give them secure attachment. And then from there, we can all go somewhere. So I'm just, I'm just edging into that because I'd love people to know this stuff because people come to me for one-to-ones and I always teach them this stuff. So here it is for free. If you want to write it down and practice the bloody thing. But if you don't practice it, you don't get it, right? You have to practice it to earn the knowledge. So what I'm really getting across here, just to do a bit of a summary of this, is that people have these really big motivational drives and they come from the feeling centers in their bodies, right? And so what we have is we have people who have this drive, everyone has this drive for agency. Now, when agency is not met, people have stomach trouble. It's in the gut, you see. The feelings are in the gut. And then they have gut trouble. So, and then we have this drive for bonding, which is the center for that intelligence is in the heart or the chest. So people go, oh, my heart racing, my heart's going up and down, and my heart's broken, or there's an emptiness, or whatever. So you have these feelings. And then when we don't have certainty, our fucking head is going crazy. You are fuzzy in the brain and all this stuff. And so when people are experiencing this and they're upset or they're given out or given off or whatever it is, they're frustrated or upset or disappointment, all we need to do is be able to listen to them, summarize back, and name their emotional state for them. Now, if you don't know what to do, right? I'm not telling you, I'm not saying this is something to do and this is, this is the rule, but this is an awful lot better than nothing, you know. At least you're not throwing petrol on the fire by doing this. So if you haven't a clue in this area, use this, but go and find out better stuff than this if you have it. And if you do, come back and tell me, of course, I'd love to know what it is. But can you see that understanding this allows us as managers and leaders of groups to understand that there's a big difference between feelings and emotions, and that if these ABC drives aren't met, then we're going to have these strong emotional situations going on in people. And if people have full of anxiety, full of sadness or disappointment, or full of anger and frustration, then the quality of their thinking is going to be reduced. So we need to be able to create the conditions where people can maintain the quality of their thinking throughout their lives, but especially in sport, because when you go into the competitive situation, it's people's ability to think clearly under pressure and keep that quality of thinking available to them. That is a vital part of them performing at their best, outperforming the opposition, and being our best in sport. So it just all adds up a little piece. So I'm going to stop talking for a while now and let you ask a question and let our listeners maybe pause this bloody thing, go back over that, listen to some of the notes, say, Jesus, I wonder was that true for me?
Yeah. 100%. No, I've listened to a couple of pieces you've done, two of them with Andrew, obviously. Listened to a couple of Pat's reference to you, or maybe name drop or maybe not, but kind of the work he's done with you. And I think you did a podcast with your son.
Oh yeah, Kane, yeah.
That was last year. That was good as well. I enjoyed it. And one of the notes I wrote down, and I was going to ask you about this, but you've kind of brought it up anyway, is emotions fuel the quality of thinking.
Yeah,
And
I'll
it's
I'll just give Kane a plug. He's in Australia, and Kane is doing, he calls it human kinder. right? And basically, it's humankind, but human beings being kinder, and that's really about, uh, you know, linkage with kind intention, because really that's the stepping stone to healing, or that's the stepping stone to improving the quality of the interdependent interactions, which give rise to this integration and the emergence of all the stuff we bloody love as human beings. So that's the magic stepping stone into all the stuff we value as human beings. But in any case, Keane takes this to a whole new level, which me being the old fella, like he's cutting whole new ground in that area. But come back to your question. Uh, just give me the question again. It's
No, it was more just a comment about what you said before. The emotions feel quality thinking, but more so, an emotional brain is a limited brain. I'm
of
just
course it is.
interested in controlling that and controlling the emotions in the moment, like that
Uh,
pressure cooker.
Maybe it's a great idea, but you don't want to control them. You want to integrate them, because
Okay.
because what happens is, from a very early stage, what happens is, because of the quality of attachment we receive, and this attachment work is really researched deeply by a guy called John Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth, and Dan Siegel. So if you're really involved in sport, you need to really understand attachment theory, because it really sets up the homeostatic resonance of vibrational energy in a person's body, my body, your body, everybody's body. And what it comes down to the quality of attention exchange we received in the first 18 months of life when we were upset. Now, we're not blaming anybody for this. We're in delicate territory here. We're blaming nobody for this, right? It's called intergenerational trauma, and it's big. It's big. But um, we're really looking at the quality of that attunement or refinement. Gabor Mate is big in this. Dan Siegel is massive in this. Russell van der Vloot is massive in this. But the body says no, and family systems thinking is all researched and done a pile of work on this. So it's really, really important. But what we're trying to get across to people is that we have these drives ABC. Yeah. And they give rise. So agency gives rise. Lack of agency gives rise to anger. Lack of bonding gives rise to sadness or grief. Lack of certainty gives rise to anxiety. Yeah, we cover that, you and I. Great. Now, the difficulty with that is that depending on the quality of intergenerational trauma or not, the quality of attention exchange we got from our kids, we can have a thing called an implicit memory. Now, an implicit memory is a feeling memory that's stored in our system. Now, an explicit memory is, I can don't know, you remember going to school and, I don't know, someone said something or did something that the teacher humiliated you or something, and that's explicit. So you can think about that, and it's in your head, right? But then there's another whole group of memories that are called implicit. So there's things implied by them. So they're implicit, they're under the cover, they're subconscious. And these are mostly made up of feelings, emotions, and primings. And these are the buggers that get us into most trouble, right? Because they are triggered in the moment, but we actually think that those things are happening now, but they're not. The emotional charge is coming from years ago. It's come from years ago. So they can actually put a turbo on these implicit memories, can actually give a turbo boost to the fear, sadness, or anger. So it gets magnified out of bloody proportion. So we're overreacting, people would call it. But we need to know these bits, because then when we know these bits and give them kind intention with a bit of mindfulness, we can actually set about tidying them up. But what I'm sort of seeing through all of this is that these feeling centers, these drives for ABC, they're sort of fueled up. They're sort of come out of our nervous system, up through our spine, and then into our brain's limbic area, off the top of the spine. So this stuff is fueled, the emotions are fueled into our limbic area. And then really what happens is, depending on those emotions, that's going to fuel a different quality of thinking. So I'm saying emotions fuel our thinking. And it's just a simple way of getting people to understand, shit, you know, when I'm in a good place, so like what emotions what might be fueling this conversation. I hope it's something like fun, love, and joy. But there's a sense maybe of curiosity, um, you know, a bit of affection, connection, satisfaction, going on between you and I at the moment. So our relationship is sort of secure attachment. Now, when I started to ask you a little bit about, well, the time will never break your heart, you go, oh my God, I don't know if I'm happy with that, because that's a bit edgy and you don't want to be talking about that in public, and everybody probably doesn't know, but anyway, you know what I mean? So everyone got their heart broken. I'm only kidding, right? So that'll get an emotional reaction from you, right? Or a giggle or a laugh or whatever's happening there now. But what we need to realize is that all the time, this energy from our body, it sort of comes to feelings, then it's processed through emotions, and then that energy then goes up and it fuels and it's processed through our thinking, and through our thinking then we make decisions, and then with our decisions we say and do things. So what I'm doing here on for the last 15 minutes of this, I'm doing differentiation with you and the people listening. People saying, God, I never knew there was a difference between feelings and emotions. I always thought it was the same bloody thing. All right. And then I've always had that feeling. People say to me, oh, yeah, they have this memory or whatever. And I'd say, yeah. And I'd ask people, like, what does that do for you? And they say, they might touch their stomach, or they might put a hand on their chest or their head. And their body is sort of telling you where their discomfort is. And I'd say, and that feeling, can you describe it? And eventually, like, I remember working with a person who was saying, oh, yeah, it's in my chest. And I said, what's it like? Oh, it's like my heart's being squashed, almost like in a childlike voice. And this is somatic integration, understanding this. And like, I love that, because the person, you don't have to really do anything with it. If the person gets to realize that this sensation that they're feeling in this is something to do with a relationship, obviously, because it's in the chest at the time, right? And if they just get to realize, God, yeah, that person always triggers that in me. Maybe it's nothing to do with them. It's got to do with an earlier event, and that's fueling this. And once they make that connection, that's linkage with kind intention. And you know what? That's the formula for integration and the emergence of self-organizational flow. So if the person can make that connection, it means that they don't have to be the prisoner of that uncomfortable reaction they always had in that person's company, even though it's nothing to do with that bloody person. It's a memory from some lula that irritated them in the future. So that then, you could put that down as personal growth or development, couldn't you? Yeah. So you can see how relevant this is. So that there's feelings, there's emotions, they give rise to it. These emotions fuel our thinking. And a big thing about this, and I'm going to try and pull that ladder of emotions together with the quality of thinking now in the next piece, right? Which is this: is like if we are, remember I talked about the ladder, and we're in security, control, and status, yeah. And we said if a person's stuck in their ego, they can only think about. Can you remember?
Me, I, and mine.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And then people judge them that this. But basically, what happens is they're stuck in an old memory of the past, and that's that. And the other, brilliant, right? Now, if people are in the higher needs of teamwork, learning, and purpose, they're thinking about the we, the us, and the our. So they're part of something greater than themselves. Now, it just so happens that a lady called Jill Bolte Taylor, and I'd suggest people go and listen to her. She has a podcast called My Stroke of Insight, Jill Bolte Taylor, and she was a researcher in Harvard, and she got a brain stroke. She got a stroke in her brain. And the left side of her brain was bleeding out, and she only had access to the right side of her brain, and she was having the time of her life, even though she was dying. So it's really worth listening to this. And then she realized, being a brain researcher, she said, shit, I must be getting a stroke in my left neocortex. And she mumbled or fumbled her way to get a phone call across to her colleagues at work, and they came and they saved her life. But what's really interesting about Jill Bolte Taylor's story is that she comes along, and then she goes and she researches all the different bundles of cells in the different parts of the brain. And then she says, really, that if we're in the lower part of our left neocortex, and it's a mixture between the security guard and the left side of our brain, then we go into very individualistic mode, right? So I'll just say some of the words that's in this. So in this left emotional individualistic sense, our thinking characteristics become constricted, rigid, cautious, fear-based, stern. We love conditionally, we doubt, and we can bully out of there. I won't give you them all, but I'll just give you then the corresponding bundled cells on the right side of our brain, right? Opposite to constricted, we become expansive. Opposite to rigid, we become a risk taker. Opposite cautious, we become open. Opposite to fear-based, we become fearless. Opposite stern, we become friendly. Opposite loves conditionally, we give it to me, we love unconditionally. Opposite to doubts, instead of doubting everybody, opposite of doubt is trust. And the opposite of bullies is we support. So basically, what this lady is saying is that when we have emotions like fear, anger, and sadness running our brain, we get locked in these individualistic modes. But when we have emotions like fun, love, and joy, which comes with anger, we can access the brain bundles on the right hand side of the brain. So, the right cocktail of emotions, we can get our whole brain working together. And that then represents higher quality thinking and decision making. So, your question is really interesting. And that's why I'm sort of saying something like really crude, like, you know, emotion fuels the quality of our thought because it bloody does. So if we have crude emotions, we're going to have crude thought. If we have more refined emotions like joy, love, and fear, we have a higher quality of thinking available. So this goes back to sport, where we have to create the conditions where players are enjoying themselves. They feel love and companionship. Now, you don't use love in sport very much, but you have companionship, togetherness, team bonding, all that stuff. And people are having bloody fun. It's curious. They're learning, they're growing, they're developing. So it's crucial that going back to the manager versus the leader, it's crucial that the leader can create the conditions to have the emergence of these higher faculties of humanity available in goddamn sport. And that's why I'm doing this podcast.
And is that when you work with a manager, because I've a couple of managers or coaches listening, and when you're
I
the one,
hope there's more than a couple. Keep
yeah,
going.
yeah. When they're the one, because I read Cody Royal's book, A Second Set of Eyes, about coaching coaches, and I'm interested when you're the one that's leading a group and you're giving and you're trying to make this environment. How do you help those coaches in their own anxieties, the pressure coming up to a big game, where they're the ones that are trying to lead a group? How do you help them,
See,
be themselves?
that's a brilliant question. First of all, you have to change the story. It's not about them making it happen. It's about them creating the conditions for this to emerge, right? And so the biggest thing, and Pat talks about it all the time, um, it's a thing I call the tell-ask balance. So we're asking questions, and when I met Mickey the first time, I says to Mickey, Harte, the first time I met him, says, "What do you want to do?" He says, "I want to develop the thinking player." And I says, "Well, how are you doing that?" And he says, "Well, I'm telling them to think." And he says, "Is it working?" I says to him, "Is it working?" He says, "No." So I was asking him a pile of questions. And I says, "How's this going for you?" He says, "Well, I'm thinking about all sorts of things here. It's great." I says, what am I doing? What's happening here for you to be thinking like this?" He said, "We're just having a chat." I said, "Well, now come on, it's a bit more than that happening here." So eventually the penny dropped for him that I was bloody asking him questions and getting him to think. So it's really simple here, Orla. If the manager needs to realize that he needs to stop telling and start asking and getting to, because a person can, say it back to me, a person can and will only do what's in
What's in
their
their head,
in their
in their own
own
head.
bloody head. Yes. Now, so our job is to start working with the picture in their head to get them to come to our picture or better, and our better parts emergence. But the skill of doing that is the skill of engagement, and this is the skill of asking questions. Asking questions, and to know the difference between open questions and closed questions, and then to be able to listen. Now, we've touched off listening. Listening is summarizing and, if necessary, naming the emotions for the person. So we need to do these things because that creates the conditions for the optimal capability or potential of that person to emerge. People talk about empowerment all the time. It's like, what the fuck? This is the skills of doing that. You're giving people the power to be their best. And this is not about being their best, it's about being our best. Because we are an hour. There's no such thing as being my best. A human being on their own doesn't actually exist. It's a nonsense. And if you want to listen to Dan Siegel about this and talking about we in interpersonal neurobiology, he totally proves this point that we're a we, not a me or a we or a us. We're a we, MWE, which means we're this collective thing. So we're not even a bloody we, because there's a bit of me and a bit of we in everything. But so that's why I call my business being our best, not being my best or being your best. Because I wanted to be about the top of the ladder. I wanted to be about the collective intelligence, because that's what the world needs at the moment. So, yeah, don't know where I'm going there. You better ask me the question. I talked myself out here nearly. And the poor listeners, I can't help it. I don't know what's going on with them.
Yeah. What do you think managers underestimate or overestimate their effect on a team?
Well, I think managers torture themselves with thinking how important they are, because the way I see it is this, and I just go to complex adaptive systems for a moment, because with complex adaptive systems, what we have this thing called emergence. So human systems and complex adaptive systems, like an ecosystem or anything else, one of the things is it tends towards increasing complexity. Right? Now, if we can have increasing complexity in a harmonious situation, we get emergence and self-organizational flow. Okay? So what managers need to do is take the pressure off themselves. They are not going to make this happen, because it doesn't work that way. Because complex adaptive systems work on emergence. So it's not about them. It's about their ability to create the conditions for this emergence to happen. The team spirit happens, the morale happens, the learning and performance cultures happen. Now, they, by all means, get to conduct the orchestra if they have the skills to do it, to construct the orchestra of people's minds. But what they need to be able to do is create the conditions for that to emerge. And the manager or the leader is in a very privileged position, because they get to work both in the system and on the system. But they need to know how to work on the system. And working on the system is about improving the quality of these interdependent interactions that creates the conditions for this bloody integration and emergence of flow, optimal performance. That's what flow is. Flow is optimal performance, but there's a methodology and a system for doing it. And just learn the bloody system. As it applies to any sport, any work situation, anywhere where a group of people have to pool their resources to achieve a shared resource.
Yeah. Because Pat's done a good bit of kind of podcasts and interviews, and Bernard Brogan's book, and there's been a lot of kind of talk around what he did. What's one thing that he did really well that he hasn't mentioned or hasn't been maybe acknowledged publicly that you saw behind the scenes that allowed for the success?
Really create the conditions. Well, you see, there's a couple of other Pete's, and he's just naturally very good at this. What you have to do is you have to validate the behavior you want to see more of. Now, he was a master at asking questions. He just loved it. Like, he just loved what I call the tell, ask, balance, and asking questions. So there's asking questions is one big thing. I'll come back to validation in a second. But asking the questions, working with the picture in their head, getting the penny to drop for the player without giving the player the chance to throw the ties out of the pram. So he was very good, and is very good, at sizing lads up and lining lads up to learn. So there's two things. You have to size him up and you have to line him up to see, can he learn what he needs to learn? So there's that. The other thing he touches off here and there is he touches off the idea that we talked a good bit about, is the difference between abstract and concrete language. So, and he talks about marking the man and doing all that stuff. But what we have to be able to do is if we want someone to perform a certain way, we have to make that very concrete. we have to bring it back to what we call sensory-based language. It's the sound of it, the taste of it, the smell of it, the feel of it. Like, what does that look like? What does that feel like? Because when people know what that looks like and what that feels like, then they can go to it. It improves their certainty. So he picked up that idea very quickly, and he hasn't talked about it very much because it's very hard to talk about abstract and conflict language to people that haven't got a fucking clue what you're talking about. So in fairness, you wouldn't have touched that. But the big thing then, on top of that, is the validation, right? So an invalidation, and I just, the people doing stats drives me nuts, right? Because people are measuring that they really don't understand the power of stats. And so what we have to do is we have to understand that knowledge is in a pattern. So we're looking at the patterns of play, right? Or the system or the patterns of play, call it whatever you want. But it's the pattern of play that we want to really focus on. So, but then we have to have a physical manifestation of that pattern of play. And then we have to measure that. And we have to be able to put that against each person. So there's no big secret. Contact tackling was something that was really important to change the culture of that group and any group, because what it does is it brings really hard work into things. So if you looked at teams like was it where Klopp was, Liverpool, right? Their ability to close the space and put pressure on the opposition with the ball was really triggering the other person's amygdala or security guard to give them no time to think on the ball, no time to. So that was all about scrambling the other person's, model of reality, their game plan. If you look at rugby, the teams now are up so bloody quick, up so quick. There's no space. There's no space. There's no space. Up so quick. Bang, 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 bang. And that's all about challenging the emotional centers in the opposition's brain. So when it came to sport back then, what we were doing, and I'd still promote the idea of making contact tackles, totally within the rules. Now, I know the rules mightn't have been transcended a small bit in a match or two recently, but we'll not go into that. But we have to be able to make contact tackles in a way that it interferes with the other person's ability to have space and time on the ball. Let's just put it that way. But we need to measure that and allocate that to players. So this is back to validation. The point I'm making here is about validation. We must validate what we want to see more of, right? And we invalidate what we don't want to see more of. Now, the way we invalidate what we don't want to see is we just withdraw attention from that and only give attention to what we want to see. And after a while, some player might get curious as to why I'm not getting played. I thought I was the star of the team. I'm, sticking in 2-4 in practice sessions. Why am I starting? I should be a forward or whatever. And then you just say, look, we're measuring contact tackles for now. How are you doing there? I don't know how to do that. There's a drill out there. There's a coach out there. He's showing everybody else. You're not buying into that. And it's like, well, you're not going to get started until you start doing work when they have the ball. There's no point being a star. When we have the ball, you have to do work when they have the ball. And this is about validation. And I think Pat was extremely good at that. Subtle, but highly effective.
Would you have interacted with players during your time with Dublin, or were you very much in the background? Like, did they know of your involvement at all? Apart from Stephen Cluxton asking Pat, did he get a lobotomy?
Well, he didn't even know where that came from. So, no, invisible. People don't know him there, really.
Okay. Is that on purpose?
Well, the whole thing needs to come through the manager, doesn't it? So I'm sort of in the background.
Yeah. Would you ever want to work with a player? Like, I'm interested in, probably what I'm getting at is the difference between working with a player individually and a manager individually.
Well, sometimes I have worked with players, but see, the manager can have so much to bloody do, right? And there's so much skills to learn in this area. So if a player really needs real clarity around the one-to-one, and if there's something blocking that player from coming to his performance, his highest level of performance, then the manager, in fairness, won't be equipped to be able to listen to that person or read or understand what it is that might be, shall I just say the word implicit now, because we've talked about it, that might be implicit from that player's part that's coming up and splitting their attention or stopping them to go towards the power in the play. So there has been occasions where I have met players one-to-one and done work with them, yeah. And I would do again, but it all depends on the situation and circumstances, alter cases all the time.
Yeah. Because I love asking the question of what stops someone from reaching their potential. What's the first thing that comes to mind there?
They don't know themselves. They don't know the difference between their own feelings and their emotions, and they don't know what's fueling their thinking. There's two things. One is absolute clarity. Like people ask me all the time. Well, I ask people all the time. They don't fucking ask me. I ask people all the time, what's the most important question a manager can ask a player? Would you have a go at that for me?
What's the most important? What's the context, or is it just
It's performance.
what allows you to be at your peak?
Okay, that's a fair question. But the question I would, because they can never answer that question, by the way, that you just asked, because they don't know the bits inside themselves. But the question I think is the most important question a manager can ask a player is, what are you doing when you're playing well? Because once the player has that, they have certainty, they know where to go to, and that answer that they give has to be part of the system of play that everyone has co-designed. That has to be part of the game plan. When we have the ball, they have the ball. So what are you doing when you're playing well? When we have the ball, they have the ball. Now, the player needs to answer that to perfection in line with the co-designed patterns of play that the management have come up with the players. And once the player has that sets context for everything else. Then if the player has the ability and they can't get to that, then we look for what's blocking what's interfering with their knowledge system or their intelligence system, because it's usually not physical. It's something got to do with something that's blocking their intelligence system or their knowledge system, that's preventing them from getting to that. So that's where it sits. Like, and yeah, I just had one there recently where a chap it was business anyway, and he was talking about a guy who played a senior level of football. Then he played Sickerson, and he had two really bad episodes. And now he's playing with his club, and he's playing crap. And I said to you, man, this fella's a really, he's a very, very astute businessman, but he's coming from business coaching, and he's played county football. He's managed counties. He's managed senior clubs in counties, and he played full back. And this player that he was chatting about played full back. And I says to this manager, I says to him, can you tell me what you were doing when you were playing well at full back? And he says, well, I was happy. And I says, well, that's great, but that doesn't tell me anything about what you're doing when you're performing well. So we diverted from business for a little while, and we took him into a bit of sports coaching. And he says, fuck, I didn't know about you 2 years ago, And I says, why? Well, because he didn't know what to get the young fella, because the young fella was good at these things too, but no one ever unpacked it with him to tell him. So the young fella could have certainty and have clarity to what to go for. And he says, why didn't I talk to you 2 years ago? And I said, well, look, I was here waiting. I don't know why you didn't come. So, but like, and like, God, this is a guy, and he's a really good guy, really committed, solid citizen, doing anything, like to do anything he could for this fella, but he just never thought to think, what was I doing playing when I was playing fullback well? Because if we can, like, and for me, if the fullback's playing well, what he's doing, he's touch tight in front, he's going to win the ball, right? He's contesting high balls coming in. If he can catch them, great. If he can't, he'll tap them down, and the cornerback will win the break and out to go. And that's the main things that a fullback needs to know in Gaelic football. And once a guy has that in his head, he'll say, I was doing that for years until the confidence got knocked out of me. Well, let's go back and try that. Then your man comes back into knowing this is what I'm doing. Yes, I know this fucking shit. But I didn't have it consciously in my head. Then his confidence is restored and get back on. He can get on with the rest of his life. So I don't know if that's making sense for you now, but it's fairly simple stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the other question I love is what separates the best from the rest? What's the 1% of the 1% doing?
They're learning. It's the appetite for learning. It's the appetite for emergence, for being part of something greater than themselves. Look at it. Look at our Irish rugby team this year. Like, they started off, and then they built. They played some of the best rugby ever with new guys and all that thing. But like, they're able to get them back to, and it's like, when you look at it, I don't care if you follow the game or not, it's electrifying. It's like, it gives you tingles looking at it, because we feel then part of something greater than ourselves watching this stuff. So we're all after the same buzz here, Orla. That's what it is. We want to be part of something greater than ourselves, which brings us into spirituality, which was that other fella's dabbling with beyond in Australia. But you know your crack. Come here. People aren't going to listen to this if we go on much longer here. You know,
I was going to say, I was going to wrap it. We'll do a part 2
we'll
at some point.
the hell. Come on, huh?
I'm going to do the Sideline 7. It's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. Bart, look, take it as quick as you want. Question 1, favourite quote?
Favourite quote? A player can only do what's in his head. Even though it's my own quote, I'll use it. Go on.
Best sporting event you've been to?
I'd say beating Donegal in a really dour match with Gilroy, 8 points to 6. It was an absolute horrible experience, but brilliant, exhilarating. Because if we didn't do that, Donegal would have bet us that year.
Question 3, biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it? Biggest setback in career. I don't have a career. What are you talking about? I suppose I didn't really enjoy Dublin not putting 2 together in 2012. That didn't really work for me. Okay. On the flip side, your biggest achievement in or outside of sport?
I think I'd put that down to my own personal learnings and getting out of the mindset. Continuously breaking the mold on my own mindset. I'd say, yeah. I think I'd put that to my own growth as a person, which people might think you've gone nowhere yet, but at least, as far as I can see, it's better than it was. Go on.
Yeah. Advice to your 18-year-old self?
What?
Advice to your 18-year-old self?
Okay, you can't get back in the womb. Advice to 18-year-old self? Start working on understanding how I worked a lot sooner. Understanding how my head worked. Definitely.
Very good. Dream dinner guest and why?
I don't know. I go to dinner with Dan Siegel because I'm looking at Dan's stuff all the time. We were on a boat trip last year in Salmon River in Idaho, and I'm just a big fan of Dan's work at the minute, and I go to dinner with Dan Siegel any day.
Very good. Final question before I let you go. If your life was a book, Bart, what chapter would this be called?
Life was a book. Jeez, I don't know. Sometimes I feel old. Sometimes I feel it's sometimes I feel it's winter. But maybe we'll be generous to myself and we call it summer. How about that?
Lovely. We'll end it on that. Bart, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Thanks. Cheers, Ola.
And that is it for today's episode of the Sideline Live Podcast. A huge thank you to our guest for sharing their story, insights and experiences with you, the audience. If you did enjoy the episode, please do leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as it does help the show grow. If you are interested in more content and information or hearing from upcoming guests, you can follow our social medias at the Sideline Live, which are linked in the description box of the episode. If you do have any guest suggestions or topics you would like to have covered, you can send us a message on social media or email thesidelinelive@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.